President Trump has imposed a 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee imports, the steepest against any nation. Brazil is the United States' largest supplier of coffee, and this move means one thing for consumers: higher prices at the checkout. For millions of Americans, mornings begin with a simple ritual: that first hot cup of coffee. It's more than caffeine, it's comfort, routine, and tradition. But now, even that small daily pleasure is caught in the crossfire of politics. Since the tariffs took effect, coffee prices have surged. A pound of ground coffee that cost $6 last year now sells for nearly $8 for importers. Invoices that once totaled $10,000 now arrive at $15,000. Small neighborhood cafes warn that this extra burden could decide whether they stay open or shut their doors. This isn't just an abstract policy debate in Washington. It's a grocery bill reality felt in households nationwide. Coffee is only one example. Tariffs on metals, food, and manufactured goods ripple through the economy. Coffee, up nearly 15%; ground beef, up just over 11%; eggs, still 16% higher than last year, and that's on top of inflation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports wholesale prices for fresh vegetables surged at a record pace in July. Overall grocery costs are up 2.2% compared to last year. At first, major retailers absorbed part of the tariff burden, but now that cushion is gone. Costs are climbing, supply is tightening, and families are left with fewer choices and thinner budgets. Economists say tariffs are acting like a hidden tax. One, that Americans are paying directly at the register. The impact isn't limited to groceries. Tourism is also taking a blow. Canada, one of America's closest economic partners, was hit with 35% tariffs on August 1st. In response, Canada shifted exports toward Europe and strengthened ties with Mexico. The fallout? Fewer Canadian visitors to the U.S. In Las Vegas, streets and casinos are noticeably emptier. According to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, total visitors in June fell more than 11% compared with last year. Flights from Canada, down 18%; hotels and casinos, tens of thousands fewer guests for a city where 1 in 4 workers depends on tourism. The absence of Canadian visitors is being felt in restaurants, entertainment, and local businesses. What was designed to pressure foreign governments is instead driving up costs for American families and draining revenue from American communities. From the morning cup of coffee to the bright lights of Las Vegas, tariffs are proving to be more than a foreign policy tool. They're reshaping daily life across the United States. A vote for Trump was once promised to mean cheaper groceries, but the reality is quite different. Tariffs, meant to put America first, are circling back onto American households and businesses. Coffee costs more, grocery bills are heavier, tourism is weaker, and the burden is falling not abroad, but right here in the United States, on families, communities, and local economies. Canada, meanwhile, isn't yielding. Instead, it's adapting, finding new markets, strengthening ties with Europe and Mexico, and holding firm. This contrast reveals something important. Tariffs are not forcing quick concessions from neighbors. Instead, they are exposing America's own economic vulnerabilities. The story of tariffs isn't just written in speeches or political rallies. It's printed on grocery receipts, reflected in tighter budgets, and visible in the empty hotel rooms of Las Vegas. What was billed as a show of strength abroad has, in many ways, become a bill handed to the American people. President Trump and his team have even called Canadians mean and nasty to deal with. Why? Not because of military threats or major trade violations, but because ordinary Canadians are quietly boycotting U.S. travel and US products. Flights are being canceled. American alcohol is left on shelves. And Canadian-made goods are surging in popularity. What seemed like a small protest has become a grassroots movement with real economic impact. It started in early 2025 when US tariffs targeted Canadian steel, lumber, and aluminum, industries deeply tied to Canadian jobs. By July, the effects were measurable. Flights from Canada to the US dropped over 26%, with Alberta and British Columbia leading the decline. Liquor boards in Ontario and Quebec reported steep drops in US alcohol sales. Many shelves were restocked entirely with Canadian or European brands. Buy Canadian campaigns surged, and independent shops across Ottawa, Montreal, and Vancouver. REPORTED double the sales of Canadian-made products compared to last year. What began as a reaction quickly became a movement powerful enough to get Washington's attention. British Columbia's Premier David Eby declared that the boycott was proof Canadians were being heard. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford took a harder line, calling on Ottawa to respond dollar for dollar with matching tariffs. Across the political spectrum, Canadian leaders stood together, defending their economy, protecting sovereignty, and showing resilience. Not all Americans echoed the ambassador's harsh tone. Just days later, a bipartisan group of US senators traveled to Ottawa. Instead of criticism, they expressed concern. Senators Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire and Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada pointed out how their states were already feeling the pain. In Nevada, Canadians usually account for 30% of international visitors. This summer, that number plunged, along with millions in lost revenue. In New England, local businesses reported quieter shopping districts and shrinking hospitality jobs. The message was clear. What Canadians do with their vacation dollars matters to the US economy. Many in Ottawa argue that Trump's rhetoric has only strengthened Canada's resolve. For them, this isn't just about anger. It's about agency. Skipping a trip, choosing a Canadian brand, or refusing an imported bottle may seem small. But together, those choices sent a message powerful enough to cross borders. Canadians didn't need to shout. They let their wallets speak. And if that made them mean and nasty, then perhaps that label was never really an insult, but a sign of strength. In the end, this story isn't about headlines or insults. It's about posture, resolve, and the quiet power of ordinary choices. While Trump's tariffs dominate the spotlight, Canada is showing that strength can be measured not just in policy, but in the daily decisions of people determined to protect what's theirs. In the end, every nation defines the kind of neighbor it chooses to be. And if mean and nasty simply means refusing to bow under pressure, then Canada is wearing that label with pride. By mid-August 2025, trade talks between the United States and Canada had reached a standstill. This wasn't only about tariffs on steel, aluminum, or autos. The real question looming over both capitals was the future of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. USMCA. This agreement protects nearly 85% of cross-border trade from tariffs, keeping North American supply chains deeply integrated. Now, that foundation is under strain. U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra has accused Canada of undermining USMCA with retaliatory measures. But in Ottawa, leaders see things differently. As a necessary defense against a trade war Washington started. As one Canadian official put it, the tariff war was launched by President Trump, and it hit Canada first and hardest of all U.S. trade partners. The stakes reach far beyond political sparring. If USMCA is altered or dismantled, the result could reshape not only the US-Canada relationship, but the economic stability of all North America. Since August 1st, Canadian goods outside USMCA rules face a 35% tariff, up from 25%. Aluminum remains taxed at 50%. Washington calls these measures leverage. Ottawa calls them pressure tactics. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, refuses to sign what it calls a bad deal. Instead, it is prepared to wait until the 2026 review. Behind the scenes, Ottawa is strengthening ties with Mexico, preparing for the possibility that Trump may push to reopen negotiations before the year ends. The United States also faces real risks. If USMCA collapses, US industries dependent on Canadian energy, auto parts, and minerals would see sharp cost increases. Already, American households are feeling the squeeze. Aluminum goods from Canada, taxed at 35%, mean higher prices for canned foods and beverages. Parmesan cheese that once sold for $12.99 now costs $16.99. Coffee, sugar, and meat from Brazil, under a 50% US tariff, continue to climb in price. Even champagne is up by a few dollars a bottle. A recent poll shows 53% of Americans now cite grocery costs as a major source of stress. Economists remind us tariffs are paid by the consumer, and shoppers in Florida, Nevada, and across the country know it firsthand. Imports are declining. Companies are buying less under higher tariffs, and those reduced supplies are driving prices even higher. For many families, this isn't policy theory, it's a reality felt at the checkout counter every single week. One Florida resident told reporters he may start eating out more often because cooking at home has become too costly. President Trump views tariffs as a negotiating tool, pressure to force concessions. But the longer this standoff drags on, the more costs land on American consumers and businesses. Canada, meanwhile, is playing the long game by holding firm, maintaining alliances, and keeping USMCA's protections intact. Ottawa hopes to avoid rushed concessions while showing it can weather the storm. This isn't just about one agreement. It's about setting the terms for how North America trades in the next decade. Caption, tariffs, and technology, and now. Tariffs are colliding with another challenge, America's race for artificial intelligence. In a recent speech, President Trump declared, America, bringing semiconductor fabrication back home is one of America's most ambitious goals. But it comes with a heavy demand, energy, and lots of it. Every advanced chip factory, every AI data center, every industrial plant depends on reliable, large-scale power. And in this equation, Canada's role cannot be ignored. When Canadian leaders talk about being an energy superpower, they don't mean only oil and gas. They mean a broad portfolio: oil, gas, nuclear, hydroelectric power, clean energy, and even carbon capture. The numbers speak for themselves. According to 2024 trade data, the United States imported between 3.8 and 4.3 million barrels of Canadian crude oil per day. Natural gas imports from Canada averaged 8.5 billion cubic feet daily, a 7% increase from the year before. Electricity flows across the border totaled 11.4 terawatt-hours, enough to power 1 million US homes for an entire year. Canada supplied 27% of all US uranium imports, sustaining a critical share of America's nuclear power fleet. Taken together, this makes Canada not just a supplier, but the primary energy lifeline of the United States. Beyond oil, gas, and power lies another layer of dependency: critical minerals. Ontario is home to some of the world's highest grade nickel. This nickel has no domestic substitute in the United States for certain defense systems and advanced battery technologies. In British Columbia, the rare element germanium is essential for fiber optics, solar panels, and night vision equipment. Canada's Trail smelter is the only domestic source of this material. These are not commodities that can be swapped in from another supplier overnight. Building replacement supply chains would take years, if not decades. If flows from Canada were disrupted, the ripple effects would be immediate. Industrial plants would face higher costs. Data centers could suffer delays. Chip fabrication facilities, the very heart of America's AI and semiconductor ambitions, would stall. Replacing Canada's mix of proximity, scale, and stability would be nearly impossible. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made his strategy clear. Canada will not be cornered into signing a rushed deal. Instead, his government is keeping dialogue open, but rejecting terms that would weaken Canada's long-term position, accelerating domestic investment in energy extraction and mineral processing, strengthening ties with global allies, reminding Washington that Canada has other options. Carney's message to the US is simple: Canada's resources are a shared strength, but only if the partnership is treated with respect. Pushing Canada too far could backfire. Without steady access to Canadian energy and minerals, US industries risk higher operating costs, slower economic growth, and deeper reliance on less stable global suppliers for an administration promising both a manufacturing revival and AI leadership that is a dangerous gamble. This is not a one-way relationship. Yes, Canada benefits from the US market, but in today's world of energy, minerals, and technology, Canada holds leverage that matters more to US stability than the other way round. That leaves President Trump with a choice. Is the price of sidelining Canada worth any short-term negotiating gains? Or does America accept that North America's strength lies in cooperation, not confrontation? The reality is clear. Semiconductors, AI, energy, and manufacturing are all built on the same foundation: power, minerals, and trust. And in that foundation, Canada plays a role no other partner can replicate. For Washington, the challenge is deciding not just how to negotiate, but how to preserve a partnership that defines the stability of an entire continent.